watching my favorite channel, the Behavior Panel.
Got you guys books
These guys
everywhere.
are great.
All right.
They
You
are
guys ready?
Yep.
for
I'm Scott Rouse, I'm a body
professional
language expert
body
and
language
analyst,
folks.
and I train law enforcement in the military in interrogation and body language. And I don't know, I get to giggle, but I'm so sorry.
I imagine y'all can hear that.
What do they call that, Mark? Corpsing?
This out of here.
Corpsing.
For no reason. There's nothing.
Yeah.
I'm Scott Rouse, I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train.
A little practice with hand-eye coordination to warm up.
I'm Scott Rouse. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, Greg.
I'm Scott Rouse.
Okay.
I'm
Just
Scott
make
Rouse.
you laugh it out. That's how you do it when you're on stage. Is when you're rehearsing,
Right.
just laugh it out.
So is my dog.
That's my favorite. I go back and forth.
I'm Scott Rouse, I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I
Sometimes
train
it's
law
Mark.
enforcement in the military in interrogation and body language. And I created the #1 online body language course, bodylanguagetactics.com, with Greg Hartley. Mark?
I'm Mark Bowden. I'm an expert in human behavior and body language, help
This is
people all over the
Canadian.
world to stand out, win trust,
Gotta love a
gain
Canadian.
credibility every time they communicate, including some of the leaders of the G7. Chase.
I'm Chase Hughes. I'm a behavioral expert in 20 years in the U.S. military.
okay, we're working.
Now I teach intelligence agencies and the general public in persuasion, interrogation, and behavioral profiling. Greg.
Greg Hartley. I'm a former Army interrogator, interrogation instructor, resistance
guys
to
are
interrogation
real
instructor. I've written 10 books on body
funny
language and
shit,
behavior.
but they-
Also put together this #1 online body language course with Scott, bodylanguagetactics.com. And I spend most of my time on Wall Street or in corporate America.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about Chris Watts.
Yeah. I'm sure most people know about Chris Watts. It's just such a good example of a horrible liar. The fact that he got in front of those news cameras, dude's an idiot.
So he's the guy that's in prison right now for killing his pregnant wife and his 2 little daughters. And this has been one that the panelists have been
Family
asking for right and left.
annihilator.
We've got a whole lot of requests to do this. So that's why we're going to do it.
Terrible.
And go ahead and subscribe.
Moniker.
Now that you're here, we're firing up. Go ahead and hit subscribe. That way you'll know when we have a new show come out. All right, you guys ready?
Ooh, I need to learn how to draw a puppy.
Let's go.
Chris Watts, WATTS.
What's going on right now around your house?
And right now it's you got
Hey,
K9
did
units,
somebody
the
check?
sheriff's department. Everybody's like they're doing their best right now to figure out like if they can
No,
get a scent,
nobody checked.
see where they went. If they went on foot, they went in a car, or they went somewhere. And right now it's just like they've been on point. They're going through the house trying to get a scent, and hopefully they can pick something up to where it's going to lead to something.
Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so look, obviously we know that he committed the crime. He's doing time for this. We know that. So what is the point of watching a video like this? Well, I think the interesting thing is for you is you'll see examples of these type of videos come up a great deal while somebody goes to the media and says, hey, find these people. And you'll often look at those and go, hang on, is something going on here? Why don't we give you some of the things that we can see that may well indicate what was going on at the time? What do we got? He does an eyebrow raise on his own name. Now,
These guys make it very clear that there's no body language. Like, they're body language experts, but there's no body language that just flat out says, oh, that's a lie or that's deception. They read body language to see stress or just different behaviors, to know which questions to ask as an interrogator. So it's not like, oh, he scratched his nose, so he's lying. It's like, oh, he scratched his nose and his armpit, and he lifted his leg all at once. So whatever I asked him right then, I'm going to focus on that, because he's obviously a little stressed about that. So, yeah, they make it very clear that body language, if you think it's a pseudoscience, then you gotta admit that you can learn things from body language, and that's what they do. And it's fantastic because Greg was in the military, Chase was in the military, Scott was like a music producer, Mark is like a life coach. That's my assumptions based on what I've heard. But yeah, just a great mix of folks. Just good, decent people at the top of their game. Really love these guys.
Well, that's not an indicator
I'm not
of
just saying
somebody
that.
lying, but it's kind of interesting that saying his own name, he already wants some buy-in on something which is total fact at this point. We know this is Chris Watts. The interviewer knows it's Chris Watts. Why that moment of recognition of buy-in? So notable there. He's already bound up here. We can already see he's bound up. There's no way his hands are coming away at the moment to do any kind of descriptor. And we've already got this pacifier gesture or movement of the kind of side-to-side stuff that's going on already. So already quite notable what's going on there. Eyebrow raise at the end there on to something. So he wants some kind of buy-in on the idea of something, but he's not naming any of the possibilities at this point. Early days in this interview, but I think already some notable
Okay,
elements. Most notable for me is the raise of the eyebrows on his own name. Scott, what do you got?
Sorry.
Well, we see that really strong eye contact just right out of the gate. Like you said, Mark, his arms already crossed. He's already in that adapter phase of holding on to himself. He's doing what Greg and I refer to as romancer. That's a thing we've come up with that's called strip, and that's where we have the ways that a person being deceptive will engage with the person that's asking the questions or the person they're talking to. And strip stands for stancer, trancer, romancer, insulator, and prancer. And in this case, and we'll go through all the definitions of them, but in this case, we're seeing what's called the romancer. That's where they dead eye with you, and it's like, yeah, they lock eyes with you, and they pay attention. They're close. They're right on you as they're talking to you, so they can make sure you believe what they're saying. And if anything looks even just a little bit of a hint of wrong, they can start adding qualifiers to that. He doesn't start his swing until he says to see where they went, and that's when he's talking about the dogs and the cops. So that's when he starts the swing. Now here in the beginning, if you just saw this at the beginning, you haven't seen the full interview, then you couldn't say, that shows deception, because we don't know it yet. It could be part of his baseline as you go along.
Yeah, the baseline.
So until you have all that information, which we'll have
They
by the end
hammer
of this,
that.
we can't say that is indicative of someone being deceptive, or he is. But in this case, we have to take that into consideration. You keep that information when you see these big body language movements.
Yeah, they do a good job
In
of
his forehead,
explaining
we
it pretty
see
much
little
every
or no
video.
movement in his eyebrow or his forehead, and his brow
You really
area.
can't tell.
And something that's
if he's
this
lying
should
because
be this emotionally charged, we're seeing nothing.
But
We
this
see
is
nothing.
unusual,
Not much
so
eyebrow
we'll
movement at all,
ask
except
questions
one of the
around
parts
that.
where Mark was talking about where his brow went up when he said his name.
That
So
sounds
this
like
is one of those things where we'll
backwards
start tracking this,
tail. It is.
because throughout this we'll see the hallmarks of a psychopath as we go through this. At the same time, we'll be gathering this information to see that he's being deceptive about all this. So remember, right out of the gate, this is where absolutists are created, where they say, I know now when he does this, that means they're lying. It doesn't mean they're lying or being deceptive. You have to watch and remember as you go down, the questions happen. He only does this when he's talking about his family and that situation. That's when he starts rocking back and forth. Otherwise, he's just straight ahead. He's standing there straight. So that's what I've got for that. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so let's talk for a minute about baseline, because I watched this guy. There's actually another video of him before he gets in trouble in 2012 talking about how to maintain a strong relationship and not screw around on your wife and that kind of thing. Irony, whatever. But what we notice is this is kind of an adapter for him. I call it chained elephant, shifting weight from the right to left leg. Politicians do it when they're uncomfortable until they're coached. What we'll notice is that will change frequency. It will get faster, and maybe even shorter and faster as he gets more stressed. That's an adapter and a way to release nervous energy. It's a way of making the uncomfortable comfortable. That's all it is. So we talk a lot about fight or flight on here. So let me talk for about 30 seconds on what fight or flight is. Your brain is pretty simple. It's there to protect your body, the body being the most important thing to the brain at the moment when you're in a bind. So the amygdala, what happens when you first get stimulus is the thalamus in your little brain sends a signal to the neocortex to say, hey, here's this thing going on, and at the same time sends that signal down to the amygdala. And there's one on each side of your head, and one's more responsible for positive memory, one for negative memory. But it gets the first vote, because that's why we're still alive, is if it mistakes a bear for a rock, you don't reproduce. If it mistakes a rock for a bear, well then, so what? And so the amygdala gets first vote, and it decides whether you go into fight or flight, whether you run away. That's quite simply it. And then it dumps hormones through the adrenal cortex and other parts of your body to start getting you ready to fight. And when it gets you ready to fight, it does a handful of things. It takes blood away from your skin, and it leaves it pale. It takes blood away from your digestive and reproductive system, so mucous membranes dry up, and there's signals to each of those running down vagus nerves and that affect your body. And then, of course, your blink rate increases because your eyes are dry and your eyelids are trying to wet them. And those are all things you can see from the outside. Now, it also causes you to try to make yourself comfortable because you're uncomfortable. Pupils dilate. There's other things that you really don't care about when you're watching somebody like their bladder expands so they don't know they have to urinate and that kind of thing. But all of those pieces are tied to your autonomic nervous system. They're there to protect the organism and make you get out of the way or fight back. We were just joking about fighting earlier. There's an interesting piece. What it does to you is turn off your thinking brain. That neocortex now doesn't matter, so the amygdala is running the show. And it will start taking away that brain. And what's telling about this guy, and you're going to see it starting right now, is when that happens, you lose language. Because that neocortex is your language friend. And when we talk about things like what we call filler words, those can also become adapters, and when you run out of words, you start trying to make sense out of what you were saying. And we're going to see that a lot. So we're going to see him sway more. We're going to see his blink rate increase. We're going to see a bunch of things happen, but the words start clustering for those, and you'll find where he's starting to tell you lies. A few interesting things. He does show
Hopefully
grief.
this sounds better. I know I talk really quiet.
But it's not profound. It's not what I expect when my wife and kids are missing. And he does a hard eye contact for persuasion. And then my favorite, he's talking about a dog being in the house getting a scent. When the dog barks, watch his blink rate. It's amazing to watch. Then he goes into a slight smile of helplessness. And the way you can see that smile of helplessness is the forehead has concern. The eyes are large because they're afraid. And you get that weird little smile. Those three things are not good indicators together. Now, we can't tell what's going on inside his head, of course, because we are not mind readers. We're reading symptoms. What I think is going on is, because now we know he killed his wife and kids, he's afraid of being discovered. Could there be a reason for him to have a smile of terror, discomfort, or fear because his wife's missing? Sure. But we'll see a lot more of these clusters, and I'll bring this up over and over and over as we see more of it. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, going with no context whatsoever. His behavioral table development score is a 12.
I was talking through all this.
But the definitive study on
those can also become adapters, and when you run out of words, you start trying to make sense out of what you were saying. And we're going to see that a lot. So we're going to see him sway more. We're going to see his blink rate increase. We're going to see a bunch of things happen, but the words start clustering for those, and you'll find where he's starting to tell you lies. A few interesting things. He does show grief, almost a micro expression, just for a second there. But it's not profound. It's not what I expect when my wife and kids are missing. And he does a hard eye contact for persuasion. And then my favorite, he's talking about a dog being in the house getting a scent. When the dog barks, watch his blink rate. It's amazing to watch. Then he goes into a slight smile of helplessness. And the way you can see that smile of helplessness is the forehead has concern. The eyes are large because they're afraid. And you get that weird little smile. Those three things are not good indicators together. Now, we can't tell what's going on inside his head, of course, because we are not mind readers. We're reading symptoms. What I think is going on is, because now we know he killed his wife and kids, he's afraid of being discovered.
I'd rather just.
Could there be a reason for him to have a smile of terror, discomfort, or fear because his wife's missing? Sure. but we'll see a lot more of these clusters, and I'll bring this up over and over and over as we see more of it.
I need to
Chase, what do you got?
Focus.
Yeah, going with no context whatsoever. His behavioral table development score is a 12. But the definitive study on this was done by Yardley, Wilson, and Lines. And they classified family killers, or people who killed their families, into 4 categories. The first one is self-righteous. Then we have disappointed, anomic, and finally, we have paranoid. The self-righteous is usually concerned with suffering, will torture younger people in front of the mom in order to maximize suffering. Here we have a disappointed case where his life is not satisfying with them anymore. So I'm just going to delete that part and start my life again. Anomic is mostly concerned with economic income. It's associated with my family. And finally, the paranoid part is people who are thinking, I need to kill in order to protect them. And that's specifically from the president, from the police, from the CPS workers, or from aliens, no matter what it is. That would be that part. They need to go away. The only way that they're going to be protected is if they're dead. But right here we have the dissatisfaction, this disappointed mindset here. I think it's interesting to just take note of that, knowing that with hindsight as we look at the next few clips.
Chris Watts, WATTS.
What's going on right now around your house?
Right now, you got K9 units, the sheriff's department. Everybody's like they're doing their best right now to figure out like if they can get a scent and see where they went. If they went on foot, they went in a car, or they went somewhere. And right now, it's just like they've been on point. They're going through the house trying to get a scent, and hopefully they can pick something up to where it's going to lead to something.
I'm trying to learn the basics here.
All right.
What happened?
Leg,
Talk to me.
dog, leg.
She came home
goes
from the airport
back.
2 a.m. and I left around 5:15. She was still here, and like about 12:10 in that afternoon, her friend Nicole showed up at the door. Like I had texted Shanann a few times that day, called her, say but she never got back to me. But she wasn't getting back to any of her people as well, and that's what really concerned a lot of people. Is like if she's not getting back to her, like if she doesn't get back to me, that's fine. Like she gets busy during the
She
day.
doesn't get back
But
to
she didn't get back to her people, which was very concerning. And Nicole called me when she was at the door,
Her people.
and that's when I came home.
It's because he lost a
then
bunch of
walked
weight
in the
and
house
got
and
handsome,
Nothing
and he's
vanished.
fucking
Nothing was here.
dumb.
I mean, she wasn't here. The kids weren't here. Nobody was here.
Pardon my language.
All right.
Can you
Greg,
beat
what do
that,
you got?
Jamie?
Yeah, so I'm going to be a little long-winded here because really, if you can't see this guy's brain is not in gear, you really are missing the boat. Word choice, right?
dummy.
Anytime you're talking about people you love and you talk about, use words like nothing was here. Not my family was not here. And the choices of words, other people or many people were, a lot of people was a word, a lot of people were concerned. Well, how about you? If I were interviewing him, I would ask a few questions. Of course he wasn't. So anyway, you're starting to see the compounding of fight or flight in him. See that tongue jut out?
Right in the middle.
His lips are dry. He's trying to wet his lips, and you may
So
call that a
then I can
grooming or
do
or some other kind of
Command
gesture, or it
Z,
could just be
undo.
his lips are dry and it's just he's starting to
And
feel the impacts of this. He's rocking more. His arms are tight.
Sorry about the
We call these
TV
barriers
behind
when
me.
somebody puts their. And just because you put your arms in front of you doesn't mean anything. But most of the time, when somebody is feeling threatened, they will put their arms in front of them and their hands will be free, so they can get them loose and do something with them. If you're comfortable, you may cross your arms and just bunch your hands in. So just crossing your arms means nothing, but when you cross your arms and you're hugging your body and you're rocking, now it's starting to catch up with him. So I'm going to coin a phrase here for him. We'll call it his sway rate instead of his blink rate. How's that? And we'll look at his sway rate as we go forward. He also has increased respiration as he gets to a lot of people. And you'll hear him scramble for words as he gets to it. When he says a lot of people, then, it's no big
I need to learn
Here's
how to
cadence shift
fill
when he says,
in.
no big deal that she wasn't talking to me, but her friends. Click, click, click. He fills that in very quickly. Too much information. And that's when I came home. Okay, where were you before that? What were you doing would have been my question there. And then he says, and
Cool
the dog
down,
bark,
computer.
watch his respiration when that dog barks again. I love this part of this entire video because I'm not sure if that's the police dog, but we all know that those dogs bark when they identify like body fluids or that kind of stuff on the floor. So I could hear him doing that.
That works.
Another poor word choice was nothing, and then he realizes, he raises one shoulder, and he fills in the blanks again. Guys, progressively, everything we look at, reduced illustrators, no illustrators except for when he's talking about the friend coming over, the sway frequency's increasing, his respiration's increasing, fight or flight everywhere. He's screaming fight or flight.
Yeah.
Chase, what do you got?
Chase is
Right after the
up
person,
and
the interviewer
coming
says, "What happened?"
superstar.
I want you to take
Well,
a
he
look. 'Cause the
already
video's
is.
about to play. You'll see a smile, and it's horrifying when I took a look at it. It is.
And he just is coming off of his first interview with Joe Rogan. And I say first because I imagine if Joe is still around in 5 years, Chase will have a lot more to say. But yeah, he's made it. He was on Joe Rogan recently. But he is a superstar in his field. Big time. I love this mix of guys. Scott is just cool. Like, he went from a super cool guy to a super cool professional guy. And I think that's just, I really respect that. I don't know what about it, but you know that he could have gotten lost in a life of partying. No, but he's a professional, strong-willed dude. And Greg, dude, reminds me so much of my dad. Maybe it's his office or office study room, whatever. But man, he reminds me of my dad. And Mark, he's just cool. He's just slick. He's like I don't know. I feel like relate to him the most. And he's always very entertaining when he describes this stuff. Chase is very succinct. Greg has just an encyclopedia of knowledge in his brain. And Scott is the puppeteer. He keeps everybody in line. It's an amazing group. Love these guys. And Chris Watts, man. What better example of just extreme craziness in true crime.
What do you got?
Right after the person, the interviewer says, "What
Turn this
happened?"
up a touch.
I want you to take a look. It's about to play. You'll see a smile, and it's horrifying when I took a look at it. It is horrifying. There's an actual smile there. And then this is before he starts answering. There's a sharp, kind of a hidden inhale, a lip lick, a single shoulder shrug, and a head shake, which before he starts answering, his deception score is a 16. This is not counting Greg's, quote, chained elephant movements here, or his sway rate. And when he says it was 5:15, his eyes move up to 12 o'clock to recall a time. And then when he says 12:10, the eyes shoot up to the 10 o'clock
Like a
position.
frog.
And I think this is his deception
Like a
area.
frog.
So I want you to keep this in mind when his eyes move to like the 9 or 10 o'clock area.
It's his
For the next few
nose.
videos, take a look at what he's saying when the eyes move to that exact position. Walked in the house, and he's describing the house. There's a sudden, complete absence of pronouns while he's going through this entire thing, which is even more deceptive here. But guess what he does when he's talking about walking into the house? His eyes move to 10 o'clock. And this is his baseline for deception in less than 40 seconds. We've got this. Mark.
Chase, let me add one thing to it. Watch his eyes. Here's the thing. Regardless of what you think of eye movement, when people are thinking, their eyes go somewhere. If he's telling the truth this time, he's not going to be telling the truth next time because he's changing up. Watch his eyes. Mark.
So let me put myself in his shoes. Now, obviously, I'm not him. We're not the same person. We can't govern or judge other people's behaviours by our own. But it is, you know, sometimes an interesting starting point to start thinking about the behaviours that you see, going, well,
Mark likes to say pear-shaped. I like that British terminology. Everything's going pear-shaped.
what would I do in that situation? If it were me, I wouldn't want to be bound up like, well, this is kind of what we're seeing at the moment in that shot, bound up like this, because I'd want my illustrators out there, because I'd be wanting to describe to the interviewer, look, here's what happened, and because the better picture I can create for that audience, the more likely it's going to be that something will trigger in their mind, and they'll go, hey, I saw something, or I think I might have some information for you. Because, you know, I want my kids and my wife back. So my illustrators would be out there. I'd also be leaning forward into the story. I wouldn't be bound up and trying to keep away from the story. Yeah, I'd be if I were doing any rocking motion, I'd be wanting to rock forward into this story rather than rock side to side around it. I'd also want to be mentioning the names of people and their relationship to me. I'd be wanting to say, you know, my wife's name, my kid's name, and that relationship, wife, my kids. He's not mentioning names, and certainly in the case of the wife, he doesn't seem to be describing anything of the relationship. And then for me, he minimizes and distances, almost negates by saying, nothing was here. That for me is the biggest red flag there, that use of the vocabulary of nothing was here. Then we see he goes back to correct himself and try and attach human beings and relationships to things, but it's a bit late by then. Would you ever say to an interviewer, you know, when you're talking about your wife and your kids, okay, or any solid relationship, important relationship, yeah, I went in and nothing was there. They're not things, they're human beings. And again, so for me, it starts to flag, okay, that's kind of interesting that he's seeing these people as objects, essentially, and not relational to him. Might be an insight into the personality that we have here. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Well, we see him lick his lips as he comes into this, and he's still doing that thing in his mouth where it's like this. A lot of people are going to think that's stress mouth. It's not yet. It's going to be later on, but right now he's still working his way up. His limbic system has been triggered, so we're slowly seeing the stress build and build and build. And what he's doing in this case, when you have I used to have it looked really cool too, like a mustache and a little beard thing, because I can't grow it out here. It just looks horrible. You know, I look like a hobo or something, even when I'm in full beard. So when you get that, you start doing this all the time. And you start goofing around little hairs there, and you pull on with your teeth and stuff. That's what he's doing. That's a habit. That's a little tick he's got right there. But at the same time, it's become an adapter. So as he's talking, as he's being asked these questions, he's using that adapter as he's thinking. And the whole time he's waiting here, as he's waiting for these questions to be asked, he's waiting for the bombshell question. He's waiting for him to really come in strong on him. And so every time it isn't, you almost see him relax a little bit as he moves forward into the answer to that. So that's just an adapter at this point. We don't see stress mouth. However, it's starting to look like it. When let's take into consideration what we saw in the last video. The big swaying and stuff. It almost stops here. Almost stops, not completely. As he goes back and forth, as he's talking about the facts. And he's talking about the girl coming over where the situation was. When he starts talking about facts, that's when he starts slowing down. But then it increases when he starts talking about the wife and kids. And that tells us there's an issue there. And if you pay close attention to it, you'll see this behavior goes in our pile of deception cues that we've seen so far. That we don't know for sure they are so far. A few of them that we've already seen, because we haven't seen enough to be able to tell yet, because there are no absolutes. But pretending we haven't seen this yet, we'll just say those look questionable. And we see those quite often when something like that happens. Then we have his blink rate. it's still slow. It's not. It flutters a couple of times, but nothing big, nothing major to go. Oh, look, he's got, his eyes are fluttering because of this, that, or the other thing. We don't see enough of it yet, and his eye contact is still tight. He's still in that romancer.
Now I'm gonna take a
groove that he's
picture
got
from
going
my
with this guy,
pops.
trying to pay attention, making sure that the guy believes him and that everything sounds the way it should, because he's rehearsed this thing. He's rehearsed it in here. But I'm sure he's told this story quite often, so he's got a pretty good handle on how that story should go. But keep in mind, when he starts talking about facts, he slows the swaying down, but at the same time when he does, he starts talking faster. Things speed up when he starts talking about the facts, the things that really happened. When he starts talking to somebody on the phone, girl came over, she did this, and he starts talking faster. Probably just to get that out of the way, because he doesn't need to think about that. So his baseline, I'm thinking, is probably a little faster than when he usually talks. But at this point, he's talking slower so he can pay attention to everything he says. All of these things we're seeing indicate, they denote, they suggest that he's heading into not limbic overload, but his limbic system is really firing up here. And he's really trying to keep it under control and trying to look cool. The only thing that's really bad on him is this swaying. And his sway rate is
Just
pretty much the same right
telling
now.
him
But
that it's gonna
going. And we
have
see
to
it the
be
whole time, except
cartoony.
for when he's talking about or relaying facts, things
Because
that actually happen.
they've got like a.
What happened?
Sorry, I keep talking through this. But they've got a like a Yorkie poo, so it'll look kind of like this dog, but it's just hair. Like I can show you. If you can see it. I don't know if you could see that or not, but it's just a dog. Like, it's just a fluff, a big fluff dog. And I'm not a professional artist, and I'm using a mouse. So like, it's gonna have to be lines like this. I won't be able to do little fine movements for hair. Cause like if I would typically do like this kind of thing for hair, Oh, I just noticed why are some of those much lighter than the others? Speed? It is speed, but you have got to be really fast. No, it's not speed. Oh, goodness. But yeah, it's hard to do little fine movements. So it's got to be cartoony, kind of like this, which is good. I like that. It's cute. Cutie patootie.
His eyes are fluttering because of this, that, or the other thing. We don't see enough of it yet. And his eye contact is still tight. He's still in that romancer groove that he's got going with this guy, trying to pay attention, making sure that the guy believes him and that everything sounds the way it should, because he's rehearsed this thing. He's rehearsed it in here. But I'm sure he's told this story quite often, so he's got a pretty good handle on how that story should go. But keep in mind, when he starts talking about facts, he slows the swaying down, but at the same time when he does, he starts talking faster. Things speed up when he starts talking about the facts, the things that really happened. When he starts talking to somebody on the phone, girl came over, she did this, and he starts talking faster. Probably just to get that out of the way, because he doesn't need to think about that. So his baseline, I'm thinking, is probably a little faster than when he usually talks. But at this point, he's talking slower so he can pay attention to everything he says. All of these things we're seeing indicate, they denote, they suggest that he's heading into not limbic overload, but his limbic system is really firing up here. And he's really trying to keep it under control and trying to look cool. The only thing that's really bad on him is this swaying. And his sway rate is pretty much the same right now, but it's going. And we see it the whole time, except for when he's talking about or relaying facts, things that actually happen.
Check him out, puppy.
What happened?
Oh, but I want to see this.
Hi, She.
distracting myself.
How'd you sleep, Papa? How'd you sleep, baby? Come on, sweetie. Good morning, Papa. Alright. Hello, Lana.
I'm gonna make my way over without stepping on the dogs. Lana's right here. You can't see her. Bella's over there. They're so sweet.
She came home from the airport 2 a.m. and I left around 5.
The fact that he gets on a news channel, I mean, I get it. You want to, if they were like, called him, I would be like, yeah, I don't want to seem guilty, so maybe I should do this. But I know I'm a bad liar. So, I don't know what he was thinking doing this. Because, man, he comes across as extremely unbothered. I mean, anybody can see what happened. If you see pictures of him from a year or two prior, he was chubbier. He lost a little bit of weight, and it made his face look much different. So he's getting attention from women that he wasn't used to getting. And so he offed his entire family. I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, if it's a problem, you need to get a divorce or separate or something. You can't really believe that them just not being there anymore is the best option. That's insane. It's insane. He seems like such a normal, calm dude.
5:15, she was still here, and
But
like
dumb.
about 12:10
Definitely
in that afternoon,
simple-minded.
her friend Nicole showed up at the door. Like I had texted Shanann a few times that day, called her, say, but she never got back to me. But she wasn't getting back to any of her people as well, and that's what really
Competent.
concerned a lot of people. Is like she's not getting back to her. Like she doesn't get back to me, that's fine. Like she gets busy during the day, but she didn't get back to her people, which was very concerning. And Nicole called me when she was at the door, and that's when I came home. And then walked in the house, and nothing was vanished. Nothing was here. I mean, she wasn't here. The kids weren't here. Nobody was here.
All right, we good?
Will you be posting those pictures of you with the moustache so actual panelists can decide if it did look cool? Because you just saying it looked cool, that's not evidence.
How many times did you try calling her?
I called her 3 times, texted her about 3 times just to say, what's going on? Like because after I called her and texted her once, it's like maybe she was just busy. Like she had just gotten back. Like everybody's probably calling her from her trip. She just got back from Arizona, and I figured she was just busy. But when her friend,
He's probably hoping that, well, he knows where she is, but probably wished she was cheating on him, because he was cheating on her at the time, of course. So he doesn't know how to handle his newly acquired good looks. He's like a child.
and showed up, that's what was like. It registered like, all right, this isn't right.
This isn't right.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so I told you, listen for his brain to go out of gear, trying to scramble as his body is trying to take over and get away. Like, 6 likes. because they're asking him something hard. And Chase, you're dead on. When he's going over here, he's using his brain in one way. When you ask him questions about how many times he called or texted, I'm sure he did that as a cover. His eyes go over here. He goes to a different part of his brain. So he's going to a different place for recall than he was going earlier. So, okay, does it mean that he is lying about something? Yeah. I mean, with 90% likelihood he's lying about something. Just a different part of his brain, his eyes are moving. And people can tell you that eye movement doesn't matter. It does. When a person's moving around in their head to new places for a piece of information they should be recovering from the same place, there's an indicator. There's a baseline deviation. That's what you're after. Doesn't mean I know what he's thinking. It means I'm going to ask that next question.
Greg is the
He's
eye.
sucking on that facial hair thing, you know,
The eye
in a
behavior
kind of a
expert.
grooming adapter move. He does request for approval when he says, I called her about 3 times. He raises his brow, waiting for approval and with a confirming glance. And then his sway rate is up now. You're dead on earlier, Scott. When he's telling the truth or when he's stating facts, his illustrators come up, his sway rate slows, and his speech pattern comes up. So all that stuff comes up. He's got six likes. He is looking around and he blinks and then makes hard eye contact again, back into Romancer. That's plenty for me. I don't think there's, this thing is so full. We'll all have plenty to talk about. Scott, what do you got?
Today?
All right.
3, 2.
Again, we are seeing that mouth adapter. It's not stress mouth yet, but we're getting close. That's good. It's going to happen a little bit later on. Now, we got to keep in mind this swaying thing we're seeing. This is, again, I want to say it one more time, this is how absolutists are born. When they see something, they go, that person's swaying back and forth, so that means they're lying. Remember we saw it in that video on Chris Watts. So that's not what we're saying here. That's not what's happening. It just happens to be part of what's going on. Having said that, up to this point, we can say this is now showing us, it can be seen as a deception cue because of the way things have changed. When he's talking about his family, we would have noticed that he was swaying back and forth. When he's talking about anything else, he's talking about what are facts that we know are true already, not knowing his story. That's when he straightens up and slows down. So that behavior of the back and forth thing is not an absolute. Let's keep that in mind. Now, something I found very interesting was a micro expression. When he says she had just gotten back, did you see that part of his mouth go up? And that indicates disdain or contempt for her. Later on, we're going to find out that he had what he calls an emotional discussion with her. As we know now from when he confessed, they got in a fight about their relationship. And that's when everything went sideways and he ended up killing her. It's tough to notice that when you're talking to someone like that, but you try to keep those things in mind when you see that. You can't run back and say, what did he say? When you're doing this live. So you have to go back and watch video at that point if you're an investigator or an interrogator. You have to look at it from that point of view, from that perspective. I've got to take some time out and go look at this because I think this is what I saw. When he touches his face with his finger right there during that lie, that's an adapter writ large. They don't get much bigger than that. We could bang, it comes up and does that number. Wow, because he's right in the middle of the lie at that point. All these things now that we've seen in the past during these videos leading up to this are now, we can start considering those as deception cues, and we can start putting those in the pile of deception because we know which ones to put in the pile of the truth because we know the girl came over. They know she called. They know she came over. All those things, they can suss those out fairly quickly and say, oh, yeah, that did happen. But right here, we can put those other ones all over here in the deception pile, and it's starting to grow. Okay, Chase, what do you got?
So we had some lip retraction immediately. So we're starting to see, I want you to pay attention to this. We'll talk about it in a second, but a lot of his deception indicators are piling up before he starts answering. So before he gets to answer, as he's realizing the nature of the question that's coming along, I think he doesn't realize that he is being judged before he starts answering. I think in his mind, the moment he starts speaking is when he needs to be on. And right here, I'm surprised Greg and Scott didn't say it. This is a textbook, perfect example of fading facts, as you guys like to call it.
Yeah.
So the volume starts up here and ends out down here. So he starts the conversation and it just kind of trails off into the end.
Didn't say it?
Let's call it.
Yeah.
Fading. This is a textbook And right here, I'm surprised Greg and Scott didn't say it.
Oh,
This is
Greg
a
and Scott.
textbook,
That's Scott's
perfect example of fading facts, as you guys like to
missed
call
thing.
it.
Scott's thing.
Yeah.
So the volume starts up
likes the
here and
fading
ends out down
facts.
here. So he starts the conversation and it just kind of trails off into the end. And he
you're
says,
not
after I called and
confident in
texted
what you're
once with
saying.
an eyebrow flash, a no head shaking, a single sided shoulder shrug, facial touching, both shoulder shrugs, and eyes moving to that
His head's
lie
too
spot
big.
that we talked about earlier, which is 10, which is a 22 on the behavioral table of elements. And keep in mind, you just need an 11 to be judged as likely deceptive. He says, friend showed up, his eyes moved towards the front door of his house, which is over there. So this is just a physical reference. I don't think it is an eye movement whatsoever. And after his statement, if you're wanting to know when to look for blink rate for deception, it typically, about 60, 70% of the time, is after someone starts or after someone finishes a statement, they're done talking to you, and now they're really nervous about whether or not you're going to accept it or whether or not you bought it. That's all I got. Mark?
Yeah, good. Okay, yeah, exactly. Contempt, disdain, a little bit of anger as well in the canine there. On, as you said, Scott, she just got back. I think it starts around she was busy, and then she just got back, and it grows over that, and then he gives it again on trip as well. So it red flags for me. There is something around getting back from that trip or the trip itself, and as Scott brought up, there's this idea of an argument, after that. So, good signal there. Yeah, that's all I got on that one.
You know what? I think this is a really good one for us to bat around, because what you just said, Scott, and what everybody is saying here, the absolutist would say he scratched his nose, he's lying. Okay, well, he touched his face, there's an adapter. Doing this, increasing sway rate. Doing this, increasing blink rate. We're looking for clusters, guys. This guy is wrapped up in clusters of behavior that indicate something in his little noggin is on fire right now. He's stressed. And that's what we're looking for. We don't know what, but we know because we know what he did. But if we were talking to this guy, we would all be digging into him pretty hard right now.
Yeah.
And I'll throw one thing in here too. When he's talking about she didn't answer my calls or texts, and that's fine, I think he is explaining character that is missing. I think he's explaining and offering some self-control and nice guymanship that is not there.
I think you're right, Chase.
That's good.
Good one.
Okay.
Real good.
All right.
How many times did
Okay,
you try
that
calling her?
face is
I called her
bad.
3 times,
The body
texted her
shape
about
is
3 times
good.
just to say, what's going on. Like after I called her and texted her once, it's like maybe she was just busy. Like she'd just gotten back. Like everybody's probably calling her from her trip. She just got back from Arizona, and I figured she was just busy. But when her friend showed up, that's what it was like. It registered like, all right, this isn't right.
We good?
Yep.
Do you think she just took off? Do you think?
I mean, right now I don't even want to just like throw anything out there. Like, I hope that she's somewhere safe right now and with the kids. But I mean, could she event? Could she just taken off? I don't know. But if somebody has her and they're not safe, like I want them back now. Like that's what's in my head. Like if they're safe right now, they're gonna come back. But if they're not safe right now, that's the not knowing part. Like if they're not safe.
If they're not safe,
Last
I want
night
them
I
to
had every light in the
barrel
house
rush
on.
me.
I was hoping that I would just ran over by the kids running in the door and just like barrel rushing me, but it didn't
Barrel
happen.
rush.
And it
That's
was just
not
a traumatic
thing.
night trying to
Bum
be
rush.
here.
Or barrel roll.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
I wanted them to
We've got
barrel
my favorite
roll
here.
into me.
Failure to make reasonable assumptions about events and suspects.
That would have been so cool.
And this is on the Reed
Do a barrel
Interrogation
roll.
Manual, page 65. Quote, "It is natural to think about possible motives, perpetrators, or causes of
Yes.
events. Guilty people are going to be
Close.
much more afraid to eliminate things from the pool, to eliminate suspects
Okay.
and potentialities from the pool. That's why we're not hearing him say the names of his kids, the names of his wives, the
Nope.
names of his friends, the location she could have gone. We want to make the pool as wide as possible. You need to search everywhere. I don't even know where to start.
There we go.
Does he like to ask himself questions? Yes. Yes, he does. This is another thing that is a deviation from his baseline. And he's exhibiting something that medically is called nystagmus here. In psychology terms, this is called a transderivational search, where his brain is trying to access, his file clerk is running around as fast as possible trying to access information. And this is processing. It's very akin, it's the closest you can be to being fully in trance when you're completely awake. And he's looking for data. And
right now
his story centers around his grief, his anguish, not a desire to recover the family.
This one's going to be unique.
He said it was a traumatic night for him. That was an honest statement. You could see his swaying start to slow down as he was talking about how traumatic it was for him. And the second identifier that it was a traumatic night for me, you can see his lips remained open after the statement. I'll pass it up to you, Greg.
Yeah, so great call out. When you look at, there are many studies that show this now, but when you look at guilty 911 callers, they don't try to get help, they tell you the story. He's telling you the story. I mean, this is not a 911 call, but he's telling you the story. And it has nothing to do with these poor kids. It has to do with how he felt. If he were really smart, he would shut up once he talked about the kids and just go cold. Because what he's doing is showing you what he does when he's telling the truth by illustrating with his hands when he's talking about how bad his night was. And then when he's talking about these kids. So this guy is a piece of work. He says, I hope, and it's the first time you see a grief muscle, I hope that she's somewhere safe, or words to that effect, and he eye blocks. Only time I see the grief muscle, he knows that she's not safe at this point. There's the asymmetric smile. You would call it, Mark, uncovering the canine. We know that anytime you've got that asymmetric expression on your face, it's disgust or contempt or some of that. And when he's talking about his wife, it's there. And then he almost assaults her character. Could she have abandoned? And then it's like he's alluding to the fact maybe the kids aren't with her. I hope they're together and they're safe, but if they're not. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on in his head. I think he's trying to figure out what to say to make sure that when things go wrong and he gets in a bind, something will come back and he'll have something to use. But he's illustrating very clearly, a little bit of voice fry, but he's illustrating very clearly how he felt. And then he uses like in this one 7 times. A very short clip. So we know his little brain is scrambling like a squirrel in the road trying to figure out which way to go. And his frontal lobe is not working. Not sure how well it works when he is. But we also know, again, I'll go back to this rocking. We know by watching a baseline of him trying to deliver a class for one of the courses he was taking at a college, that when he's uncomfortable, he does the shift. So his sway rate's up, and we see all of that going. Mark.
Yeah.
Just mentioning
so again, if it were me, you know, I would be worried that that my wife and kids are missing. I would want to throw a lot of stuff around, throw a lot of options out there, you know. And he says, I don't want to throw anything out there. And when he says, I don't want to throw, you know, anything out there, we see that canine come up. Yes, disgust, disdain, contempt, anger, elements of those possibly in there. The swinging from side to side has gone up. Now we've got to critically think some of the swinging. Understand by putting his arms here, he's raised his center of gravity. So you know, anybody could swing if they put their hands high enough and try and stand still. The body will start swinging, but this is pronounced enough that clearly there is some tension in the legs that has to be exercised in some way. And because he can't get off and walk anywhere, he can't leave the interview, he's only left with this pendulum device going on. One notable thing as well, really watching the reaction of the interviewer. Eyes dead set on that interviewer to work out how's that person responding to my story. And here we start as well for him to be framed as the victim here. He had a traumatic night, so poor me had a traumatic night.
Poor
He
me.
starts to put himself in that narrative as a victim there. So again, we'll feel empathy for him, we'll feel sorry for him, our heart will go out to him, and that should dull our critical thinking around some of the discrepancies in the story or the behaviours that he's giving out here. Scott, what do you got?
On this one, I'm not going to be able to, I'm disgusted. So I'm not going to be able to approach this from a non-emotional perspective
Scott
and
hates
use
this
foul
man.
language. So I'm going to pass on this one.
Do you think she just took off? Do you think?
I mean, right now I don't even want to just like
See.
throw anything out there. Like,
That's something that is going to it hurts society so much. How smart, intelligent, reasonable people will recognize when to be quiet, when it's not going to benefit anybody. People who don't have that self-control and self-awareness combined are loud and make their points known without caring how it affects anything. And so now we've got the internet. It's like the loud idiots speak up the most when the people who should be speaking up are not willing to kind of do bad faith arguments. The people who shouldn't be reproducing are willing to do that. To just do you, get yours. And that's very frustrating. But it gives me immense respect for people like Scott, who, maybe he was like, I hate this guy and I don't have much to say other than I hate him and I want to make a point that I hate him because he did such a terrible thing. Maybe that's all he wants to do and that's fine. But it's just an example of self-control. The people who we want to reproduce have self-control. And they're like, man, 2 kids might be too many in this society. The way that things are looking, 2 kids, man, are they gonna have a decent life? When the people who shouldn't be reproducing are just like, yeah, you look good, let's make a baby.
I hope that she's somewhere safe right now and with the kids. But I mean, could she just taken off? I don't know.
She's
But
with
if
the kids, but
somebody
I mean,
has her and they're not safe,
ain't,
like
then,
I want them
yeah.
back now. Like that's what's in my head. Like if they're safe right now, they're gonna come back.
barrel
But if
rush
they're not safe right now,
dummy.
that's the not knowing part. Like if they're not safe, last night I had every light in the house on. I was hoping that I would just ran over by the kids running in the door, just like barrel rushing me, but it didn't happen. And it was just a traumatic night trying to be here.
From old looks like
All right, we good?
Yep.
Like noon in the dead of
I'm gonna ask some kind of tough questions on the relationship with the kids.
I mean, my kids are my life. I mean, those smiles light up my life. And there's like, I mean, last night, like during when they usually eat dinner, it was just like I miss them. Like, I mean, I miss telling them, hey, you got to eat that, or you're not gonna get your dessert. Just like you're not gonna get your snack after. I miss that. Like I miss them. Cuddle up on their couches. They have like a Minnie Mouse couch and a Sophia couch that they cuddle up on and watch, Bubble Guppies or something. And it was just like,
Bubba Guppies?
I was. It was tearing me apart last night, and I needed that. I needed that last night, and for nobody to be here last night, and to go into their rooms, and know that I wasn't gonna turn the rain machines on, and I know that I wasn't gonna turn the monitor on, know I wasn't gonna kiss them to bed tonight. It was. That's why last.
The thing that Scott may be so pissed about is somebody may know this, but okay, his wife was definitely deceased when he was going to drive her out to where he buried them. Sorry. The thing that just blows my mind and makes me not want to think about it is, I think at least one of the kids, I think they both were alive when he was driving them out there. Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of a different case. But if I'm right, then if what I'm thinking is right, he drove his deceased wife out to this oil field where he worked, well, checked up on, and buried her in a shallow grave and put the kids in like a oil tank. But I think he drove them out there while they were still alive. Like, the terror, confusion. My dad, my mom is here, but she's not awake, and she won't wake up. What is going on? Where is Dad taking me? Why isn't he talking to me? Why is Mom not waking up? What the hell is going on? Yeah, that's what. If Scott is thinking about that, then I agree. We need to set this guy free. He needs to be oot in a boot. So he can get some justice, you know. Cause that's crazy. That's terrible to think about.
That was just horrible. I couldn't do it.
No joke.
I want everybody to just come home. Like, wherever they're at, come home. That's what I want.
All right, I'll go first on this one. We're seeing that mouth habit again, and now it has turned into stress mouth at this point because he's hanging onto it there, and you can see him pressing down. You can see his lips pressing together there. And he's prepping, again, he's prepping for the question. He's waiting for that bomb to drop. It never drops. So that's almost a relief for him. Then he gets into this explosion of flowers and glitter about how he loves his children, about his unquestionable love, and all the little things they do. And he smiles the entire time. Now, a normal human would, at this point, if they're going to cry or show any emotion whatsoever, if their eyebrows are going to start, if their brow is going to be pulled together in the middle, if they're going to start showing some grief right here on their mouth, their chin, and their forehead, this would be the place in a normal human. Again, as we've gone along here, we've seen all the things that show us we're dealing with a psychopath. Not all of them, but a whole lot of them. No emotion here whatsoever. Still talking like a robot. Still not showing any emotion at all. His eyebrows, and it's not from Botox, his eyebrows aren't moving much at all. And again, we see nothing that shows us any grief whatsoever. Now, he's talking about his children. That's the whole thing is based on what his children, how much he misses them, and it's all supposed to be focused on him. In 64 seconds, this guy says I 27 times. Now, if you listen to it, he says something really quickly, but you count him. I did. I went through this thing about 5 or 6 times to make sure I was right on that. 27 times he says the word I, showing no emotion whatsoever, smiling the whole time. And it's not even a real smile. What he's done here, as psychopaths will do, is they'll be under the impression they should be smiling during something to show, oh, I just...
And if y'all saw the Zelensky and Trump meeting yesterday and the day before, please, can you admit to yourself that was embarrassing? J.D. Vance was going to bat for Trump because he was sensitive and saying you need to be thankful, you need to show respect. Like, Yes, you do. But he wasn't being disrespectful. What set Trump off was the fact that Zelensky said, "You've got a nice ocean in between you. We need you as a backstop, because if Putin wipes us out, then yeah, you've got an ocean, but you're next. Like, you're." And Trump was like, "Don't you dare say that, because all Trump cares about is optics. Like, he doesn't want anybody thinking that the U.S. is at risk of anything, because that's just impossible, and his followers wouldn't like to hear that." So he just got J.D. Vance started the whole thing. He's like, "You need to treat us with respect, da da da." And then Trump's face gets all red, and he just runs with it. And it was so childish. Listen, I voted for the guy, and I have my own reasons for that. But that was embarrassing. The fact that he got so upset. If you don't recognize that what he got upset about was not the content, well, it was. It was about just him not threatening in the least, but just saying this is realistically what happens if Russia wins. They're gonna keep going. If they're your enemy, like, I think with Trump, it seems like we're trying to be buddies with Russia. I don't know. He was like taking every opportunity to defend Putin, but the reason the whole thing escalated was because J.D. Vance said something about being respectful, and Trump just ran with it. And it's so dumb. And they're gonna hold that resentment, that childish resentment from this innocuous thing that set him off. He's gonna hold that resentment and not be willing to make amends, or it's like broken now. Trump isn't gonna be like, "You know what, you're right, let's talk, let's move forward." He'll be like, "No, you need to kiss my feet, apologize, and then I'm gonna brag that you kissed my feet and apologized." And it's just, all I'm saying is, try to be objective. Look at what happened yesterday and just admit that, damn, that was embarrassing. We're not that sensitive. We want to be able to talk. And if something offends us, we talk about it. We don't get red-faced and say, "You need to apologize and treat us with respect," and da-da-da. It's just unbelievable. And I'm sorry that I am talking about that. I just wanted to say that I voted for Trump, but damn, that was embarrassing yesterday. And I'm sure these guys would agree. It's just embarrassing. Of course, we're morally bankrupt. We know that. This country is run on greed and lawyers. Of course, but goodness gracious, that was an embarrassment.
Missed him so much, and the smile should be real if he was going to do that. We see no hallmarks of a real smile. When he's doing the smile in impression of a smile, but when he's smiling,
How does that sound?
these parts of his mouth don't go in deep enough. They don't indent. When you really smile, your brain is the one that pulls those parts of your mouth in. So this part of your mouth comes forward, and it deepens it in there, makes these big dents in there. And the same thing for the eyes. You don't see, this is the orbicularis oculi right here.
This doesn't
And when
look
you
like a
squint, you didn't
dog.
even try to squint. When you squint, when you're smiling, that makes these things wrinkle on the side, but they don't wrinkle the right way because it's not your brain doing that, you're doing that. These facial muscles and this big part right here is pushing up the orbicularis oculi, which is pushing those up and makes it squint. What happens in real life when you really, as Duchesne de Bologna noted, is when they really smile and their
Smile.
eyes go on the side like that and make those little wrinkles. It comes down like this. It doesn't go up like this. It comes down like this because it's happening from the inside. It's pulling those, not pushing on those. And by the inside, I mean the brain. Now, the last thing he says is, that's what I want. That's what that's the 27th eye in there. And then there's a full 7 seconds of stress mouth just standing there doing that as he starts to begin that little sway part again. So that, I think at this point, we can feel pretty good that we're dealing with someone we would question about whether they were a normal human or might be a little bit headed towards psychopathy in this. Personally, having seen so many of them and dealt with so many of them, I would go ahead and say, man, we need to watch out. I think this guy's a psychopath. But clinically, you can't tell sometimes for 6 months to a year. But in this case, I think we're seeing enough here to go ahead and say, wow, this isn't good at all, especially since we already know the outcome where he's killed him. And we can look at him and say, there's no emotion there anywhere. Still talking like a robot and doing the mistaken impression of trying to smile when he's supposed to be sad and smiling. He didn't put that together when he's seen someone else smile during their sadness. He thought it was just smiling. And psychopaths will do that because they don't understand emotions, because they have none. They have no empathy. So what they'll do is they'll see your emotion and they'll remember that and they'll copy it as they go out with their friends and people they hang out with and show them that emotion. So that person will never question whether or not they have emotions or not. They'll take the emotion they see on you or someone else and they'll just copy it and show it to someone else. That's how they look like they have emotions. He's not even doing a good job at it. I can't believe the guy talking to him and saying, "Man, this is getting weird. Why are you acting this
What's
way?"
up, Ella?
Didn't call him on it because that shouldn't be a real smile.
What
It's
you
not.
doing,
He shouldn't be
Baba?
trying to make a real smile. He should be sad and smile at the same time. Chase, what do you got?
Well said. 100%
Thank you.
agree. I think there's some malignant narcissistic traits in there.
That's what I would
For sure.
say.
In the first 3 seconds, we have a hard swallow, lip retraction, eye blocking, and an escape glance, which I don't think we've mentioned here before. This is horizontal aversion of the gaze where the skull and eyes move both. So the eyes move and the skull starts to follow it. This is searching for an exit or an escape glance or escape gaze. The word like is coming into play 700% more than his baseline. I spent an hour watching this piece of human on YouTube today, his YouTube videos.
And draw
Communicates uncertainty and is
actual.
this is a linguistic tool. He's using the word like as a unconsciously as a linguistic
Actual
tool to
model.
create vagueness with the hope that vagueness will create some understanding in the long run. It'll be easier to relate to because I'm not certain about this stuff. Not one single team pronoun here in a statement. Like Scott said, he doesn't say we would do this. I miss
-1.
them. We would all do
-2.
this. Us. We need us back together. He did all the parenting according to his stories. He didn't say we would turn on their noise machines. We would put them to bed. We would be watching a movie together. And he finalizes his statement with eye blocking, blink rate at 93 per minute. Granted, somebody might say there's a TV camera around, which might make him a little more nervous. The average TV camera blink rate when someone's on television is 21. Greg?
Yeah, so a couple of things. While I agree with you, he's using like. I think that he's just a roach when the lights come on when he uses the word like. I don't think that anything's in there. I think this is just his brain going tick, 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 and trying to fill in blanks, and that's his word, right? If he used a
You
word
okay,
like
Bubs?
chicken, and he would be saying chicken 7 times. Whatever it is, because he can't think of the right word, he's just going to roll something off of his tongue. And if you watch his video, even when he was teaching this course, he has filler words all the time because when he's uncomfortable, he does that. So, Mark, you talk about Peach all the time. Let me talk for a minute about horses. Horses have this thing called weaving, and it's considered a vice. If you have a horse who has the weaving vice, you have to say, hey, this horse weaves because it wears their joints out. And they do this. And what you notice in a horse is that they do it when they're nervous. And the more nervous they get, the shorter the stroke and the more frequent it becomes. Watch what's happening. He's not swaying as smoothly. It's going to be more frequent and shorter stroke. So interesting to watch the effects of stress on his brain, and you're seeing it, and Chase, you're hitting dead on. I call it oblique angling, that escape, that look away. It's the guy standing looking at his watch, looking past his watch to the bus that you were joking around with. It's that move, trying to get away, get that head out of the way. So, don't lead with your jaw. I have it on my notes as well. The only time he was really illustrating is he did say, "I want them back." I'm sure he's thinking, what did I do? Not because he feels for them, because I don't think he has any feelings, but because he realizes this is going to come to an ugly end for him. I think he can see that with all those dogs in there.
That's what
You
I'm
watch his
going
barriers
for.
get tighter, his blink rate just goes through the roof there at the end, because he realizes that this thing is tightening in, and we're going to hear harder and harder questions as this goes. I can't say I feel any sorrow for him. Guys, if you wonder why we giggle about things like this, it's because comeuppance is a good thing for this guy. And so watching him do something stupid and look like a worm on a griddle doesn't bother any of us. It's just the way it is, and that's where we're at. Is that everybody? Or
Yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah. So he's being torn apart. So he says. Last night he was getting torn apart, and he needed his kids. He said, "I needed that. I needed
Need
that."
them to
So
barrel rush
to
me,
Chase's point,
dummy.
what we have there are some examples of narcissism where the others in his life are there in order to feed his well-being, his emotional well-being,
What is
or,
it, Bellabo?
or his practical well-being. Yes, it is malignant narcissism
Bella
and his
doesn't get
psychopathic.
around
It's a
very
really,
easy.
really bad combination. The kind of combination that could potentially
stood
commit
up all
the
by
kind
herself.
of act that he did in the end, which is,
then
if
she
you know
fell
about that, it's pretty out there.
No, she stood up and then she laid
Okay,
down
so he says,
all by herself
I miss them. An optimist would
to
say,
get comfy.
I'm missing
I'm
them
so
right now.
happy.
He says,
I'm taking care of Bella. Her back legs don't work hardly at all. Like, if I'll scratch her on the left side of her neck, her back left leg just goes crazy. And it doesn't work when she walks very well, so she slips a lot, because we've got these plastic wood floors. But I've been trying to give her some loving. And I think that she's responding to it, because she sleeps in my room. She hasn't whined at all. She used to like whine, cry, and it made me so sad. But she seems like she's doing so much better, and I'm so excited. Makes me so happy. Alright, back to the behavior panel. The goats.
I miss them. That has a finality for me that even
terrified
if I
of drawing
didn't know
this.
the outcome, I would be going, why does he not have hope right now? What I've experienced with
I don't
others
know if you can see,
in
but this is
similar
Lana.
positions, but not the bad actors in this situation, is they tend to they hang on to an optimism. Whether it's something religious or just a general optimism, they tend to form words around that. He doesn't. Seems very final.
Sorry, it's kind
And
of a
then,
mess.
yeah, so
She's a
frames
very
himself very
anxious
much
girl.
again as the victim here,
So
with
I'm always
everybody else
taking care
being
of her,
part of holding him
making her
together and his
safe.
well-being.
Usually
the
we've got
finality
dog
of
music
I miss
playing,
them,
but
and then I think as Scott
I
was saying,
didn't
we
know
get
if
this long
that
lip
was- if I
compression
could use
at the
that
end,
without
which
getting-
is nothing like we've seen
because like last
before
time I streamed
on,
while
I want,
watching something, I got a
everyone
warning.
to come home. Huge lip compression.
Trying to
on
avoid
Yeah,
that.
that's what I got on that one.
Excellent.
I mean, I'm not like making money or anything,
Relationship with the kids.
and I
Yeah,
love
I mean,
these
my
guys.
kids are my life. I mean, those smiles light up my life. And
Ah,
it's like,
this
I mean, last night, like during like at when they usually eat dinner,
What am I doing?
it was just like I miss them. Like, I mean, I miss telling, hey, you got to eat that, or you're not gonna get your dessert, and just like you're not gonna get your snack after. I miss that. Like, I miss them, cuddle up on their couches. They have like a Minnie Mouse couch and a Sophia couch that they cuddle up on and watch, Bubble Guppies or something. And it was just like, I was it was tearing me apart last night, and I needed that. I needed that last night, and for nobody to be here last night and to go into their rooms and know that I wasn't going to turn the rain machines on, and I know that I wasn't going to turn their monitor on, and know I wasn't going to kiss them to bed tonight. It was. It was. That's why last night was just horrible. I couldn't do it. I want everybody to just come home. Like wherever they're at, come home. That's what I want.
This dog has no features.
We good?
Yep.
Well,
Literally, it's just hair.
Did you guys get into an argument before she left?
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional
Mama,
conversation.
what am I-
but I'll
what
leave
am
it
I
at
gonna
that.
do?
But I just want them back. I just want them to come back.
Mama,
And
what am I gonna do?
If they're not safe right now, that's what's tearing me apart. Because if they are safe, they're coming back. But if they're not, this has got to stop. Like somebody has to come forward.
You spoke about her family, like her parents.
Yeah, they've been in constant contact, like every hour. I mean, everybody back in North Carolina and the East Coast. I mean, from Maine to Florida.
all right. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so this is the first time we see a fuller shot, so we can actually see that he's protecting one of his joints here. So it's not, because it could be cold, couldn't he? Could be cold. He's raised his center of gravity, and so yes, no, but it's not. He's protecting a joint here, which suggests to me under stress. What kind of sings out to me in this is the pleasant look he has all the way through this. It's not quite a smile. It's just pleasant. It's just a pleasant day for him right now. And that is, for me, totally incongruent. Totally incongruent with this. He remains with that pleasant air on his face, gentle smile, all the way through. Very incongruous. Again, he goes for it's tearing me apart, frames himself as the victim, and then this has got to stop. Well, the this that he's talking about, because he doesn't know, if the story were a story where he's not the perpetrator, he doesn't know what's happened to them, and he's come up with no solutions as to it, so he doesn't know. So the this can't be what he imagines is happening. It has to be his own state. This has got to stop. So now I think we're seeing the tension and pressure that he's under, and he wants this to stop for him. Again, that is a relatively narcissistic trait, even if he weren't the perpetrator and there were the possibility that they've been abducted, the wife has run off with the kids, taken them away, whatever it might be, he possibly wouldn't say, well, this has got to stop, because the focus wouldn't be on you, it would be on them. And there is no focus at the moment on them, their state, their potential state, their safety. There's nothing around that. And for that reason, if I was seeing this fresh and this had just come up on the news, alarm bells would be going off for me, because I'd be going, why do you care so much about yourself and not them in this particular situation? Chase, what do you got?
Most of his nervous behaviors we're starting to see more now are anticipatory in nature, anticipation. And in my career, I don't know how many thousands of hours I've been doing this, I've noticed this is a lot more common in people involved with sports and athletes. You can even go back to the O.J. Simpson interrogation. I think the detective's name was John Van Adder. And you watch those tapes and watch him being questioned or deposed, you can see the same thing. You see it with a lot of athletes. There's some digital flexion, finally. Right in the pinky.
Excellent.
Right in the pinky. So that digital flexion is a stress
Yeah.
response. And if
If
we're
I try
breaking
to
body
draw
language down, I have to
based on
teach you
this
body
model,
language in 3 seconds.
This
The
is
body's
what
either
I have to
closing
work
or
with.
opening. That's how I would teach it to you.
And
So we see
ain't
that
gonna
digital
work.
flexion, the fingers are pulling in towards the palm,
So,
and it's great. It's right there on his arm. And I wrote down here, Mark taught me this. We were having a glass of wine or something
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Mark taught me this thing about the joints, and I've started to see it in a lot more places than I thought I would. And I truly believe it. And I think when he says, I want them back, he's more concerned with the rapport with the interviewer than anything else. So that's what he's done his whole life, is mimic and build rapport and build trust with people, so he defaults to that script or that narrative that is just programmed in him. And this is common in guilty people, because innocent people are more likely to open the floodgates no matter what. It's guilt or shame or anger or sadness. They're a lot more willing to open this stuff up. This is research from a guy named Vrij. I think everybody here has seen his name. I think it was 1999. And continues to make no mention of these people's names, which is Shannon, Bella, and Cece. I hope you guys remember it, because I won't say this guy's name. I'll pass it to you, Greg.
Yeah, so I used to say to my kid, every morning I wake up a monkey, every night I hope to go to bed a human. There's a lot of monkey in us, a lot of behavior patterns that emulate apes. And one of those is nervous smiles, that when you're in a bind and you go, hey, chimps show their teeth when they're nervous or terrified. And when we're not cognizant of what we're doing, we can do all kinds of weird things with our face. And I think Ekman said there were 19 smiles, and the smile is the most complex of all human communication. If I'm wrong, you guys write it down below. But I think I recall that being correct. It's been a while. And you see here this face that's connected in some weird way, an awkward kind of a smile that doesn't fit, and there's still asymmetry in the smile all at the same time. He's signaling all kinds of confused things. And Scott, I know you're going to wrap this part really good, because you're going to tell everybody why he's doing that. But he's asked a question: did you argue with your wife? And that question's clear. It's coming across the bow. What would you say if you didn't? No, we didn't. You wouldn't say we had an emotional discussion. Okay, that's softening whatever happened. Right there, I'd want to dig in if I'm talking to this guy, because he's hiding and hedging something. He distances, then he does that little weird nervous smile again. And every one of you has made a mistake in your life, done something that didn't feel like a mistake when you were doing it. You wanted to do it, and then you got busted, and you all did that weird little smile too. It's how when we ask a question in interrogation and someone laughs, we know they did it. They may not realize they're doing a laugh or a smile. It's a nervous release. He does that. So we're paying attention to that. That's asymmetric signaling, and then this barrier gets tighter. And Mark, I appreciate that covering the joints piece. I also think he's keeping that hand free, right? No one is going to trap their hands if they're under high threat. So we're seeing that. And then let's leave it with words that he says. It wasn't like an argument. It was an emotional conversation. But I'll leave it at that. That means I'm not talking about that anymore. And then he goes into this weird logic thing I won't cover again about if they're safe, then I didn't even follow it. It's so squirrely. It's just about they're dead and I know it, and if they're safe, they're safe. If they're not, they're not. So Scott, you want to wrap up his behavior?
Yes. Let me start here, though. I can't believe none of y'all said this. When I say it, you go, oh my God, because Chase nailed us on one of these earlier. And usually I'm checking these off because I have to do a bunch of them, because by the time it gets to me, they're all gone. He opens up with chaff and redirect.
He does.
Because he says, we had an emotional conversation. I'll leave it at that. Then he starts talking about all this other stuff, and the guy just goes down that hole with him. I can't believe none of you guys said that. I kept waiting. And you went back to it. Greg, I was like, well, shoot, it's your chaff and redirect is one of your terms. So I figured, well, here it comes. I get rid of that one. So anyway, that's what we're seeing is this chaff and redirect. But when he said that, when he said we had an emotional conversation, I'll leave it at that. That's when he should have pulled the Dr. Phil and climbed right on up in that cauldron and let him have it. Because the door, pardon the pun, is wide open at that point. You can say, well, hold on just a minute. What are you talking about? Where are we going with this? What do you mean you had an emotional conversation? What is it? But he doesn't. He said, oh, okay, and just lets him go on. Mind-blowing how easy that was. And I think the reason that we're seeing that weird smile is because, again, he doesn't know what emotion to use. He's seen somebody use the smile as they're sad, trying to go, I'm trying to get through this horror, and, trying to, that kind of thing. But he doesn't know how to do it. He's doing it wrong. So that's why we're seeing all that weird confusion on his face. He's seen people do it, and he's tried to do it earlier, and he's trying to do it one more time. So that's why I think it looks so confusing at that point. Then he says, "I just want them back." Like, you kidding me? Really? It's unbelievable how lame that was, and the interviewer let him get away with it. Now that might not be the interviewer, the news guy from TV, the guy who goes out, the reporter who gets the story. He may say, "Go ask him these questions and bring it back and we'll edit it together." Maybe in a situation like that. But if this guy is any kind of interviewer, he should be ashamed of himself for not stopping it right then and going, "Hey man, we got to get into this. Hold on, everybody, check this out." Should have really gotten up his hind end on that one. And and then that same, going back again to wrap that thing up, that we're seeing the confusion because he doesn't know how to give the correct or proper emotion in this situation. He thinks he does, but he's doing it wrong. In other words.
This might be a tough question, but did you guys get into an argument before she left?
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional conversation, but I'll leave it at that. But I just want them back. I just want them to come back. And if they're not safe right now, that's what's tearing me apart. Because if they are safe, they're coming back. But if they're not, this has got to stop. Like, somebody has to come forward.
You spoken to her family, like her parents?
Yeah, they've been in constant contact, like every hour. I mean, everybody back in North Carolina and the East Coast. I mean, from Maine to Florida.
Right. We good?
Yep.
What is her parents saying to you? Like,
They're just like if they need to get on a flight, just let them know. Because I mean, they feel helpless right now because they're on the opposite side of the country. I mean, Colorado is. I mean, you can't just drive around and look. I mean, it's just like you wouldn't really know what you're looking for. That's what the cops pretty much told me. That first day, I was like, I want to get out and drive around. They said, you wouldn't know what to look for.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. Remember, we talked about the sway rate. It's not slowed, it's constrained. So he's moving. He does a request for approval, raises his forehead when he's telling you why he didn't go out and look because the cops told him he wouldn't know what he was looking for. His blink rate's up, and that's all I got. Scott, what do you got?
All right, the like you just said, the swaying stops almost completely because he's relaying facts.
Yep.
He's talking about what happened there, so he's not worried. He's not got his family on his mind, and doesn't have that set of information that he's been spewing out earlier that he has to worry about or pay attention to, or that's making his stress level go through the roof. And going back from the very beginning up to this point, we've seen when he's talking about family, when he's talking about things that happened, when he's talking about what the police did or what people are doing, then he's stopped swaying. He just stands there as he's talking. We see his illustrators get bigger, a lot larger. Usually when someone's being deceptive, you'll see the illustrators, as we've seen throughout these videos, come to a halt almost as he may be moving back and forth. The illustrators are the things you use to, your brain emphasizes specific words and phrases like I did just then. And so now he's swinging his hand around, making a slapping noise on his elbow, and going to the joint thing you guys were talking about. You'll also see people cover their knuckles and their fingers this way with the other hand. It does expose these, but they are covering them. Is an adapter, and they're also most of the time squeezing, but you'll see that as well when it comes to covering joints. And that's why then they rub their legs, it'll be on their knees, those style of coverings. All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so biggest one for me is the big swallow on the mention of the parents. So I think the parents are a threat in this situation. If the parents actually said, fly down, sure, come on over, but hey, you know, the police are telling me you wouldn't even know what to look for. There's just really no point, because I guess the parents are a big threat here in that they would potentially not give up. They would search longer and longer. They would uncover more. They would be able to get into the relationship. So I think, big swallow there on the parents is indicative there is a bigger threat in his mind with them. Chase, what do you got?
Squiggles like that.
This little, what, didn't even have time to start a GoFundMe before any of this stuff, which some of them do. I think it's interesting. He's finding it easier to use his hands to gesture and talk about stuff because he's mostly telling the truth here. So there's 3 phases a person does that commit a crime. They go through 3 phases before they talk to the police most of the time. This is rationalization, projection and denial planning. And this is from me, but the rationalization, I did this because the projection, these are all the reasons. This is who could be responsible: the environment, my childhood, society, social media, all this other stuff. And then denial planning. Now I'm going to kind of craft a story or figure out, I'm just going to rehearse saying I didn't do it in the car on the way to the police station. So you kind of go through those 3 phases, and you see that he's in this 3rd phase. He's already got to this 3rd phase already. He's got his denials planned out. And I think a lot of what we're seeing here, keep in mind, we talk about how this stuff is very tactical and calculated, made to make another person feel a certain way. It's unconscious. He doesn't have some mastermind playbook on how to control human emotion. An idiot could do some of this stuff because he's been doing it since he was young. I just wanted to put that out there, that this is not a smart person. It's a person who has these innate skills, mostly due to a lack of emotion.
What is her parents saying to you?
Yeah, just like if they need to get on a flight, just let them know, because I mean they feel helpless right now because they're on the opposite side of the country. I mean, Colorado is, you can't just drive around and look. I mean, it's just like you wouldn't really know what you're looking for. That's what the cops pretty much told me. That first day I was like, I want to get out and drive around. They said, you wouldn't know what to look for.
Okay, we good?
Yep.
Questions. What is law enforcement? What have the police or the sheriffs or your neighbors? Is anybody? What's police saying to you?
Right now, this is what they're doing right now is with the canines in the sense. I think this is the biggest thing. This is the biggest thing they've done so far, because yesterday Frederick Police Department did all the searching of the house and try to gather whatever information they could. And with the detectives, officers, and sergeants, and today it's, obviously with all the activity that's around, it's there's a lot going on around here, and I really hope that all this can lead to something positive.
All right. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so Chase, when you're talking about why people lie, whatever they make up, whatever cause, they also have to think about how they're actually going to deliver the lie. And so Scott and I talk about a trigger. The trigger in this case is he killed his wife and family, so he had to start making up details already. And he knows where he's got strong or weak story. You don't have to be smart to know that. If you say, hey, I went to work today and I went to this place, they might go there and check it. So he's trying to avoid all of that. And that's a style of avoidance. We talk about lies of omission. So he's had a trigger. He's fabricated what he wants to talk about. And he's deconflicted. He's not going to talk about work. He's not going to talk about anything. And every time he gets the chance, when he's pitching, when he's telling his lie, he's going to redirect and get away from it. And that's what he does here. When they're asking questions about what the police are doing, that's a rambling bunch of nothing. He has riveted eye contact. He's back Scott in Romancer, from what we talk about in True Crime. His blink rate is up, and he's licking his lips. He also is doing kind of that drawn back, Mark, you'll talk about bitter taste in somebody's mouth, disgust. And he's swallowing pretty heavy. He's back to some facts because he jumped off the thing about his family, and he's now jumped off and he's talking about something else entirely. In this entire thing, I hope that something positive can come out of this. Well, if I were missing my wife and my kids, I would know what the positive thing I want to happen is. And I would be, somebody help me find my wife and kids. He knows that's not possible, so he's hedging, and I think you're right, Chase. He's not the sharpest tool in the drawer, so that's the way it is. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, so I think it's a non-answer to begin with, which is deceptive in its own. The interviewer asks, what are the police saying? And he talks about what the police are doing. And we have 3 categories of that deceptive behavior can fall into. And this is preparatory, delivery, and review. Like at the review phase, I'm looking, did you believe me? I'm assessing what I said. I'm planning what's going to happen next. And if you want to see it at the very beginning of this, as he realizes what the question is about, blink rate is over 100. I've been waiting for an example of this on the behavior panel. So the panelists finally get a chance to see what it looks like. Over 100 blink rate. Also lip licking in preparation phase. More deceptive, hard swallow. I hope this leads to something positive, which is his innocence, is what he's thinking about. And his answer, his entire answer, is like a mental thesaurus. Like we have this and this and this, and here's another word for it, and they're doing this, and here's another word for that, and another word for that. So he's just trying to give out as much information as he can to sound smart, well-informed. Who the hell knows? I don't give a crap. Scott.
Okay. All right. So as he's again, we hear that swallow. It's audible. You can go gulp as he swallows because they're starting to talk about the sheriffs and the police department and law enforcement, and that's making him nervous. So we're seeing that limbic system. It's not worn out, but at this point, it's been through so much. He's kind of relaxed for a minute. Then he starts talking about that stuff, and he stiffens up again. Again, he's waiting on that possible bombshell to be dropped on him, but it never happens. He's still waiting for him to Dr. Phil him one time and get up and start trouble with him. No swaying. Not his sway rate is dang zero. Nothing. Not even a little bit.
Everybody's
because
up,
he's just
so the
talking facts.
complaining
His
shall
illustrators get
come
huge
out.
at this point, just swinging around, talking, throwing his hands
What
around,
did I
and he's just
do
relaying information
wrong
about what the police
this
are doing.
time?
So it's low stress for him. And again, looking at all the footage of the lying, comparing the lying and telling the truth, he's lying when he's
Feel
moving
okay
around
if
a
you
lot.
just told
when
me
he's talking
rather
about his
than
family, because that stress builds up and he starts tightening up that
voicing
grip.
it to the
And then when
ether.
he starts relaying facts, when he opens,
You know?
Chase says you're either closing or you're opening. Opens right up and is like,
That doesn't help
it's
anybody.
like Frank's not welcome. He just opens right up and starts talking. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so absolutely, Chase. Like blink rate goes off the charts at that point, and just as you said, Scott, audible gulp. I mean, it
Yes,
comes over the
I'm
mic,
gonna-
clear and positive. I think he's under a
Keep
lot of
begging
pressure and
people
stress
for
right
money.
now because he starts in, and Greg, you're like this. He starts into this jibber jabber. It's just a torrent of nonsense before he finds his form again, and he really hits a list. Essentially, he's able to give a list of law enforcement that have come round, and he's got it all there. He says, and he names hierarchy. So what he's trying to do is go, look at the list of people that are here. Look how important they are. So he says canines, detectives, officers, sergeants. Like we've got them all. We've got them all, and they're all in there. And there's a lot going on. He says around here, and that he hopes something positive comes out of it. And he looks away from the house and off. My guess is he's trying to put down that hierarchy of police
Alright,
to
I'm
go,
gonna stop
look,
streaming.
there's a lot happening here. If there were anything to
eavesdrop.
find, they'd be finding it right now. And really the positive thing is they should all
I'm gonna
clear
keep
out
drawing.
and go and search elsewhere and get out of where the hot
So
spot
y'all
might
have
be.